Yep. Hey, Mika, the New York Times are talking about the debt. The New York Times had a fascinating lead story this morning talking about how our public debt's expected to rise, I think, by $500 billion per year over the next decade.
On Saturday's front page, they talked about the pros and cons of another stimulus. The New York Times this morning reporting that the federal government could be facing an even bigger deficit once interest rates catch up with the trillions of dollars in short-term borrowing. Now, according to the Times, this is their reporting, quote, the government faces a payment shock similar to those that sent legions of overstretched homeowners into default on their mortgages. With the national debt now topping $12 trillion, the White House estimates that federal interest payments will rise by over $500 billion a year over the next decade. That's pretty unbelievable. In concrete terms, an additional $500 billion a year in interest expense would total more than the combined federal budgets this year for education, energy, homeland security, and the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Mike Barnicle, this is the issue, and the president, we've heard from Politico, is going to make this a top issue in the State of the Union address, but Democrats and Republicans alike are going to have no choice but to tackle deficits and debt.
They're going to have to, because as we were talking earlier, I think ordinary people are far more concerned about the deficits in this country and the cost of programs in this country than people on both sides of the aisle in Washington are. I mean, they can figure it out. They've figured it out.
Harold?
Listening to Senator Hatch and Senator McCain, I appreciate the outrage, but I would remind everyone, this health bill being proposed by the Senate Democrats and House Democrats, in fairness to them, they're paying for it. We may not like the method of payment, but they're paying for it. When I was in Congress, and frankly, the greatest spending legacy the country will know when I have kids and their kids, if we don't address it soon, is the prescription drug bill that we passed into Congress, which add almost $600 to $700 billion of debt to this country, or $1 trillion of debt over the next several years. Why? Because there was no cost containment and we didn't pay for it. All the outrage in Congress around deficits, I appreciate, and I hope that they become more disciplined. Yeah. But the reality is they at least are paying for this health bill. I'm not convinced it's the right bill that's on the floor, Joe, but I give the Democrats credit. They are paying
Mika,
for their
I wrote about
bill.
that $7 trillion prescription drug benefit back in 2004, criticizing Republicans. Dave Walker, who was in with GAO, actually called me up and said, you're underestimating the cost to America. It's much worse than that.
I didn't vote for that bill.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you. So let's talk again about paying for things. Dave Obey, one of the top Democrats in Congress, is talking about a tax.
House Appropriations Chairman, and I'll just synopsize what he told ABC News. He says this: if they ask for an increased troop commitment in Afghanistan, I'm going to ask them to pay for it. He made it clear that he's absolutely opposed to sending any more U.S. troops to Afghanistan, and says if the president decides to do that, he'll demand a new tax. He'll call it a war surtax to pay for it. You know, it's, what is it, $1 million per soldier?
It is $1 million per soldier, Joe. We've been over in Afghanistan, obviously, since 2001, Iraq since 2003. At some point, if we're going to be the world's 911, going all over
Joe, it would have been good if you had said this in 2003 when you and I debated the Iraq War. Yeah. We've spent $3 trillion in the Iraq War. Ultimately, that's what it's going to come out costing. And at the time, we were passing tax cuts under George W. Bush. You look at the legacy of the ballooning deficit, which I admit is not a great thing, and it goes back to that. That is the real cause of it. When you see John McCain standing up the Senate floor posturing about
the Iraq War, Joe, is the cause of the ballooning deficit?
It certainly is. It certainly is.
It's going to end up costing us.
It's going to end up costing us $3 trillion, Joe. Much more than certainly much more than the health bill.
The Iraq War.
Yes, the Iraq War.
You need to check your facts and figures. Well, I mean, interest alone, as we just said, and it's on the front page of the New York Times. Interest alone per year is going to dwarf what the Iraq War
Interest on what? Interest on the payments for these two wars, among other things. When you see John McCain stand up on the Senate floor, braying about the supposed cost of the health bill, the truth is that the health bill is scored as saving us money in the deficit over the next 10 years and saving a lot of money, hundreds of billions of dollars over the next 20 years.
Joe,
the wars are costing us trillions of dollars.
Seriously, Joe, if you believe, and by the way,
I'm going to give you a book that proves it. I'll give you a book by a Nobel Prize-winning economist that proves it. You should have had him on this show.
We've already had him on the show, Joe. And you know
$3
what?
trillion bucks.
It was really, the cost of these wars were shocking until we saw the type of spending that's been proposed over this past year, and suddenly you scratch your head going, oh my God.
But the spending over the past year at least has a purpose, Joe, which is to try to reduce unemployment. Really? Yes, it does. The fact is that the deficit's growing has a lot to do with how many people are unemployed.
Joe,
ask,
you know what?
Ask any economist about that.
The only jobs that have been helped by the stimulus package and the other spending have been jobs, well, in Washington, politicians.
No,
and the bailouts, Wall Street's done pretty well. Main Street's still hurting. By the way, Joe, if we want to go back and talk about the past, I'll be glad to do a long litany of things that you said about Ronald Reagan and the 1980s and the Cold War. Yeah. Well,
what I said about Ronald Reagan?
I mean, if you're against everything that George W. Bush is for, you're going to get it right 1 or 2 times.
Or 3 times, or 10 times, 20 times.
Yeah, I'm saying I give no credit to people that are against everything that conservatives or Republicans do, and they get it right once or twice.
Yes, I'm glad you've changed your mind about paying for these wars. That's all I'm saying now, because back when you weren't especially for it, you wanted to have the war and you wanted to have the tax cut too, and that is a big part of the reason why we're in deficit trouble.
Joe, we actually...
This is not productive spending, by the way. I mean, we didn't need to have a war in Iraq.
If we want to go back and fight the wars of 2003, that's fine.
I don't want to go back and fight them. I'm just making a point about the fact that I agree with you, Joe, that we should pay for wars as we go along. If we're going to go to war, if we have some reason why we have to take military action, let's make sure we pay for it rather than having a tax cut. I think you need to put all this in context. When you look at deficits and the problems that we have in spending, let's look at what is a productive way of spending rather than, a wasteful thing.
All right. And again,
like an unnecessary war.
And I will say, and the facts bear it out, if you are blaming our $12 trillion debt, which Barack Obama is going to take up to about $24 trillion, $25 trillion on the Iraq war, you're looking at numbers through, actually, I don't know what kaleidoscope you're looking through numbers, but it is a small amount of this $25 trillion debt that Barack Obama and George W. Bush together are going to strap on the American people.
When you say together, I appreciate that. I think it's important to look at the entire historical context. I think the wars are a big part of this. But the real question is, how do you spend money? What do you spend it on? And whether you have people employed? Because if you have people employed, you start to pay down the deficit. And that's a critical part of the debate that's ignored.
And by the way, Joe, you said you wish I'd been this way several years ago. I've got a book for you I'm going to buy for you. Hold on, let me finish this. It's called Rome Wasn't Burnt in a Day.
I don't know how many times I'm going to get to come on the show, Joe.
No,
hold on a second. This is an important point, though. And in Rome Wasn't Burnt in a Day, which I wrote in 2004, before Bush's re-election, I said, you can't fight 2 wars, cut taxes, have a $7 trillion entitlement increase, allow domestic spending to grow at a faster rate than any time since the Great Society, and expect this economy to survive. I mean, I wrote an entire book in 2004 about it.
I just want to know if you're going to sign the book to me.
I will sign the book to you, and I will circle and highlight that portion that says exactly what you said I am now for. I was actually for it then.
That is excellent.
I'm for it now.
All right.
Do you feel relieved?
Not to solve this in 3 hours.
Relief.
I'm going to put this quote up on joe.msnbc.com just for you and everybody that's going to write snotty emails.
Now I feel special.
No, but Joe, you're welcome back anytime you want.
All right, coming up.